everybody, and since this is the last session on the Friday afternoon, so hopefully I'll keep you up a little bit longer. So today, I'm just going to cover off, go into a little bit into Azure OpenAI and just describe what that is and how that applies to Copilot Studio. The sponsors first, otherwise I'll forget. So the sponsors and everything. I originally from London. I kind of support West Ham football team. Not sure how long I can get away with that photo. It's a few years old now. I came to New Zealand 2018 and I joined Oxygen. Oxygen subsequently got taken over by Capgemini. I'm still with Capgemini. My story is similar to how he described his kind of career and his story during his presentation. So I do enjoy the 8-bit computers and the retro arcades. So into that, and after his presentation, I just put this up. So I actually built this cabinet, housed it with like a Raspberry Pi computer and a software called RetroPie, and that emulates anything basically from 1980s to 2005 or so. So, and then hooked up some controls, and R-Type's one of my favorite games as well. So today I'm just going to give a little bit of background into like Copilots. I know everyone's a little bit familiar. I did stand up here probably about a year ago and did a very kind of intro into Pilot and AI, and while we come in a year, it's pretty astonishing. So let's talk about Copilot and Azure AI Studio and the kind of differences. Get you familiar with some terminology that we're going to be using. Then I'll go into a demo, and I'll try and keep it quite light and quite quick, and conscious it's like Friday afternoon, and you've seen a lot of content today. And then we'll just close off, talk about the costs a little bit as well, from what I understand. Any questions? So by now, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Copilot and seen or used a Copilot of some description. There's many Copilots. So in most of the tools that you use, Soft Office, Power Platform, all Copilots, and they all have their own little kind of job and context from which can help you do your work. They're all built in, they're all pre-built. A lot of them by Microsoft, obviously, and they're baked into the products that you're using. And also provided and updated by Microsoft. But there is also the capability to build your own Copilot. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. Now the difference, we have kind of, some of you have probably seen Pilot Studio in action today during some of the presentations. If you think of Copilot Studio as your low-code approach to being able to build a Copilot. So similar to the other applications in the Power Platform suite, they're low-code, they're designed for kind of low to mid-level technology understanding and being able to build things with WYSIWYG type approach. So you don't have to know too much about what's under the hood, what's powering what you're building. It's a similar approach with building Copilots. So and again, depending on within your organization, the kind of the skill levels that you have Power Platform administrators, developers, then Studio is going to be the ideal place and them to be able to build a Copilot. But the speed, you don't have to worry about what's under the hood. You don't have to worry about largely most of the security and the compliance is taken care of as well. See all of the hosting of it and everything like that. So you don't have to worry about software as a service model, license fee for the privilege of being able to use it. Whereas on the other hand, if you have, say, AI developers, or you have data scientists, or staff or team members with a more deep understanding of how AI works, then Azure AI Studio is really the place where they will want to be using and building a Copilot. So for one, you've got much more fine-grained control over the base of the large language model that you're using Copilot on top of. Also being able to ground that with your own data as well, and being able to kind of monitor it and tweak things with it, like tweaking the security, tweaking how much it's costing. So there's a great more fine-grained control over what you're building. And also, if you're into different models as well, not just the GPT models, then it's the place for you too. So it's just a little bit of a comparison. And just as an overview, we talked about the out-of-the-box Copilots, which come pre-baked in with the software that you're using. And you have a place to extend it. That's typically where we go into Copilot Studio. Then build your own from scratch, which is where I'm entering into the presentation. And just a brief summary of how this is architected, which is kind of important when you're going into Azure AI Studio and you want to understand certain concepts, to be able to build it, because you are building it from scratch. And obviously this architecture is catered for you in Copilot Studio and the Power Platform. Break out of that and you go into managing your own environment in Azure. You need to have some understanding of how things work. So typically a Copilot starts with a user prompt of some sort, someone asking a question or interacting with the Copilot. What happens next is that your question usually gets grounded some sort. So we'll go on to kind of describing what grounding is, but essentially it's using your data, grounding your question to your context of what you're doing within your organization, the role that you're doing, the job that you're, task that you're wanting to achieve. So kind of narrowing down and fine-tuning the answers that you're going to get back. That grounded prompt then gets sent over to your large language model. So that's typically your one of those ChatGPT as a model. Hundreds, if not thousands, of models. And then there are some responsible checks. So once the large language model has provided the answer internally, the architecture will go off and it will make sure the answer is compliant, secure, and it's not gone out to looking for data and all those kinds of things. And then your response. So that's typically how Copilot works behind the scenes without you even really realizing it. Some terminology. So most people know what the large language model is, but obviously it's a machine learning model that understands human language. So it can interact with you just as if you're speaking to another human. Another important concept is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And that is the architecture or process of making an LLM more efficient, textual to what you're doing. Grounding is something that is key to the RAG process. So grounding is basically getting your large language model and narrowing it down or giving it the context of your own data. Tokens. So again, with Copilot Studio and the Copilots that you're using, you don't really get a sense of ultimately the energy that's using, costs that you're paying for it. And tokens is a unit of measurement. And when you get into Azure AI Studio, you see the tokens that a prompt uses, and you see the tokens that response uses. And you'll have limits both within your environment, so that ultimately there's a finite resource of compute power. So the way that Microsoft will control that in the tenancy space is to give you depending on how much you're willing to pay, they'll give you a finite restriction on the tokens you can use. But also you might want to just control or limit the tokens that are used. So for example, you ask ChatGPT a question and it gives you pages and pages of answers, that might cost you a fortune. And actually what you want to control that in some way by limiting the response that comes back to 300 or 400 tokens, and a token equates to 4 words in English language, like that, roughly. Also, earlier, I think the first presentation this morning was about semantic search, and typically used to searching with keywords and matching keywords. It's kind of the traditional search approach. Then semantic is more searching and indexing around the meanings around those words and the context around those words. So glasses, that I put on my face versus glasses, it kind of understands the concept throughout anything that, and there's something called vector search, which is really captures those kind of semantic concepts as vectors and maps them together. So it's quite a key concept as well in all this. So that's enough background. I'm going to sit down now and do the demo. So it's a live demo and it is Friday afternoon. So therefore things maybe not to go smoothly. Let's hope they do. Just on that previous presentation, something in me that I used to work in London. The rule that we went out for lunch, which involved drinks in the pub, and was that you could stay there as long as until you were the most senior person there, basically. So if your boss was still over there drinking away, then that was kind of free rein for me to carry on. But as soon as he left and I was a senior person, it was like, okay, it's time for me to go. It's a bit of Japanese culture. So the context here is that I am building a Copilot for my company's travel. So we're a company that's a lot of travel, business travel, and there's documents in SharePoint say that policies and regulations around travel and who to book with and so forth. But I'd rather the other company wants a nice Copilot experience for employees to use. So it's kind of the context of what I'm to build here. And because we've got fairly skilled people within our IT team, that data scientist, and we've got an AI developer, I'm choosing to do this in Azure AI Studio. So what I've done here is I've got an Azure tenancy resource group created, and I've created a resource called Azure AI Hub. It's kind of my first resource really to start. And just looking around in here, I can see, if I go to the model catalog, so the Azure AI Studio, this experience that I'm using now is think of it as like a visual, as probably an Azure DevOps for building AI and Copilots. So it allows you to, you've got a hub you can create multiple projects and house them all within here. There's like a development experience. You can build solutions and you can deploy them and control all of that. So it's really a tool that encompasses kind of houses suitable for development, really suitable for development teams to be building pilots. If I look at the model catalog, kind of where I want to base my model on, see there are 1,795 models in here. So there's the familiar ones in here like ChatGPT, DALL-E for image to text, or sorry, text to image. And these are all OpenAI models. OpenAI obviously affiliated with Microsoft and trusted by Microsoft, so they want to push to the forefront. There's also other models here, Microsoft models, Meta models, and models from other organizations as well, other vendors. So you can basically deploy these models and have a play around with them. And also, if I go to benchmarks in here, this gives you kind of a tool to be able to just see what models are the most appropriate that I want to use. So, for example, in here, if I'm interested in question answering, that's my key thing at the moment, and my important metrics maybe are groundness. So I want to make sure that it's really grounded to my data and it doesn't go off, skew off, and somewhere else. And also maybe coherence. So I want it to be really coherent and accurate for you. So it gives you kind of the data to be able to look at, okay, what are the kind of best models for doing that? And so just something that the tool provides. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a familiar model, ChatGPT. Also, I talked about tokens earlier. Now, here's a page provided by Microsoft, and it gives you all of the kind of costings, consumption prices for all of the models and kind of their rates, if you like, per in tokens. So you can kind of see that some of them, GPT 4.0, is going to maybe be a bit more expensive than something like GPT 3.5. So again, you've got to weigh up those kind of benchmarks with the pricings to find the best model that we want to use. But the point is that you've got the control over it. So if I go to ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, I'm going to deploy this model, give it a name. So we'll call that so what I'm doing here is I'm taking the model and I'm deploying a version of it, my own version of ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo inside my Azure environment. I can control the version. So there are different versions of ChatGPT of this particular model. Some of them are related to or depending on the region that you're operating in. There's that tokens per minute rate. So I've had to kind of risk setting up a Azure subscription for this demo, and I don't want the prices to wake up tomorrow and I've got $1,000 bill. So I'm going to skew that right down to 5K per minute. And I'm not going to let it be dynamic and expand when it feels like it can do. So again, I can control that. I can deploy that. And yeah, pretty much instantly I've got my own GPT Turbo model in here. So what I can do now is I can open this up in what's called the playground, just running around. And here I can test my model. So I put, for example, in here something like, what can I book? You can see down the bottom right there, it's the tokens it's using. So 235 out of 16,000 tokens. But you can see there the response it's come back with. So it said, like a generic response, basically. So there are several ways to book travel. There are online travel agencies like Expedia, blah, blah, blah. So it's using its knowledge that it's been trained on from the internet in a period of time. But it's not really important. It's not really relevant for me and company. So, so what I can do next is there's a section down here where it says add your data. Now, what I've got is I've got a document here which is like I've just found off the internet, but it's basically a company travel policy. So you can see in here things like travel, so frequent flyer, preferred carrier is Air New Zealand. Just a bit of kind of generic travel policy that you could is perfectly acceptable to demo. And you can see here, like your dedicated account manager is Wendy Watermelon. So, so what I do is when I add my data, add a data source in here, I've got a number of data sources I can use. Now, Azure AI search or cognitive search, as it used to be called, again, is a powerful engine that you can ingest data from pretty much where databases, data versus connectors for all sorts of data that you can pull in. But again, you can fine tune like how that search experience works and the index that's there. So if I've already got that in my company, so I've already got data from a data warehouse and SharePoint and all of that all mixed together, I can connect to an index already. But for this demo, I'm going to just upload that file. And what it will do is essentially upload it to blob storage, a search index just for that document. And then it will link it back in here and it will do that all for me through this AI Studio. So I've got my subscription there. I've got a blob storage, resource. And then I've got a search index ready. I've got a search resource that I've already created. And then I'm going to create a new index. So I'm going to call this one Wellington demo. So it's warning me you're going to incur usage onto your account, hopefully not too much, but there is the warning there. So as soon as it starts indexing, search is going to start costing. And for this, I found that you couldn't use like a free, for this demo, I couldn't use like the free Azure search. It won't work and integrate correctly. So I had to use like a basic pricing for it. So I'm going to browse to a file. I'm going to upload the travel policy document. Upload that there. That's done. I'm going to go next. See there, do I want a keyword search or semantic search? I've picked semantic because that's optional. It's going to cost a little bit more, but the benefits outweigh that. Next, I can, how do I want to connect my search index and my data to my Copilot? So I can use those manage identities that I mentioned. This demo API key is sufficient. And I'm just going to validate that. I'll save and close. It'll ingest that data. So what that's doing in the background for me now is creating a search index. Uploading that document to the Azure Blob Storage, creating a search index, going over to that document, pulling it in, and creating an index for me, ready to use. So it doesn't take too long, it takes seconds. Good. So now I've got my model, I've got my data linked to it. So now if I go into my chat and I ask the same question, travel. So now it's giving me more contextual, grounded answer. So it's saying basically I can follow the procedures in the travel policy. I can talk to Wendy Watermelon, and it's also giving me a reference. So rather than above where it was just generic information, it's now giving me a reference, so I can go into that policy. I also internally got the comfort that it's come from my own. It's not generic. So you can see how you can quickly evolve that. That's just off one single document. I can also do things in here, like at the moment, my system prompt up here just says you are an assistant. So if I wanted to make my change the personality, if you like, of my Copilot, I can do that. So let's tell him that you're a friendly corporate assistant, provides policy advice for employees. Your tone is friendly, helpful, and chatty. In here. And save that. Sometimes it doesn't, and straight away, but if I go high, a little bit more, hey, how are you today? And I ask the same question above. Say, I'm not sure how travel you help. Somewhere. So there. So of course, I can help you with traveling, you're booking travel. It's got just a bit more about it, a bit more personality. All about putting in there, I'm a grumpy developer who likes working in my back bedroom on my own and see what comes out. But like that. But yeah, just generally a little bit more helpful and a bit more lively. So it just shows how you can shape your Copilot. Now, what I'm going to do now is there's other things I can do in here as well, so that I can work with the prompts itself. There's a prompt flow engine in here. I can do things like I can fine tune it. I can link other data in here as well. There's all sorts of things I can do in here, but it's too much for today. I'm going to deploy this. Now I could deploy this as a web app in Azure, so I could deploy it, actually see like an endpoint that you can link to. So if you did have your own custom website and you wanted to add it, you can do. I can create a Teams app, so I could then upload it to Teams chat. I'm going to deploy to Copilot Studio. I've got our platform tenant, and thing is we're since BizApp Summit sort of bring it back into Copilot. I can choose my environment. And then yes, so this is going to fail. So I have obviously played around with this a little bit. It's all still in preview, so it is quite flaky. And sometimes literally the rug's been pulled from under me whilst I've been working, it feels like. Things are changing that rapidly. Experience, and also like there's something went wrong. Now that's just because, so if I go back in here, so this is a new user experience. If I go to the old look, go back to the experience. So I'll go to the older look. Still got my model in here. I'm going to Copilot Studio. Once again. So this time I get to call it something. So we'll call it Pilot. So obviously I can create the Copilot in Copilot Studio directly, but this allows your team of experts to create a real dedicated, fine-tuned, controlled Copilot in the background in Azure. Push it into Copilot Studio, and then your low-code people can come and pick it up. So let's say I'm now sort of passed on. You can see here's my Copilot. And what happens is be topics in here, and if I go into my kind of system conversational boosting topic, so Copilot's got to a point where there's no specific topic, so it's fallback almost. I go into here. So where the trigger is unknown intent, so I'm not quite sure what's been asked of me, then I'm going to go to my data sources. And if I edit the data source in here, now what should happen? Now you can see here I can link to public websites and SharePoint, but then also OpenAI services. Should happen in here is that it should all be connected for me. I deployed from Azure, but I found that connections don't come through. So that's the one thing I do have to do is add these things manually in. So I have to go back to Pilot Studio, Azure AI Studio, find my elements, this demo one here. And fill a couple of these things in. So deployment there, the API version, how it's connecting back to your Azure level search. And again, I found that this preview is the only one that seemed to work for me. And then if I get these sort of maximum tokens, all those configurations that I put in Azure should come through here, but it hasn't. So let's the temperature is like a term for how cold, if you like, your Copilot will be in terms of going outside of what it's being asked to do. So you find that kind of this is a scale between 0 and a 1. 0.7 seems to be. Go to model, I need to add search index. Tell me. So if I go to my AI search resource and I see my indexes, so you can see the indexes that have been created, one that I've used. Size. If I needed to, I could kind of link specific URLs or titles to parts of my data as well, to, again, to have a bit more context. And then that system message that I added in to make my Copilot a little bit more friendly, that hasn't come through either. So there's a little bit of glitch, and hopefully these things will get worked out. Right. Save. Okay. And then if everything's worked as it should, I should be able to say same question. So see, it's come through down to this in my flow. So the hasn't quite all come through, but that's also happening in the background as well. But what you can obviously do here now, once you've got that base model in here, you can then work on pulling in other knowledge as well. So I can go back to that topic. And I can also do things like add public websites. So, for example, if the company want to travel to the US, for example, I might want to kind of reference this travelstate.gov site that tells I need to know about visas and traveling and travel updates and warnings and things like that. So I can supplement my data that I've uploaded in my index with something directly in Copilot Studio. I'll add that as well and save that. So then I can use this Copilot again within the Power Platform. So as an example, we created this portal, Power Pages portal. Again, using Copilot, I just did that today, literally this afternoon. And within Power Pages, go to, here's my site in Power Pages, and then I go to that site. Quite easily in the setup area of my that I created into setup and add a Copilot. What that does is that adds a default pilot. It creates one on the fly. It doesn't give you the option actually to say to pick a Copilot from your Copilot Studio library. But there is a way to change that. So you can actually go into my data behind here. I go to look for site components and filter this by bot consumer, but there's a type of site component called a bot consumer. And if I select that data within there, here's the content. Now there's the schema name for my Copilot. So I can actually change that to the one that I've just built. And then I site down here, it's a nice Copilot there. I can ask it I book travel. Understand me because it's demo. Let's try or we need to bring today. I have there we go. So that's worked. So you can see that it's pulled some data in from that website that I linked from. So it's just there's a bit of a connection glitch with going back to my Azure data source. But hopefully you get the gist of all of that. And if I go back to my slides, just to kind of recap. So essentially what I've done there is to create a Copilot in Azure AI Studio. I've refined that Copilot, added it with my own data, then deployed that Copilot to Copilot Studio. And then they can tweak it and they can put some prompts around that. And from there, deploy it out to Teams or to this portal site that I just did. So yeah, just to recap then, so Copilot Studio is a great low-code approach. If you want control, Azure AI Studio is where you want to be. Deploy a Copilot from AI Studio to Copilot Studio, and you can add that to other applications. Costs. So main costs are going to be your AI search. So yeah, depending on the tier that you're using for that, processing and the amount of data that you're indexing. A basic tier can be something like $70, $80 a month. And obviously, it can go up to hundreds of dollars a month. You've got Azure storage. So depending on how you're backing that storage up, the data you're using in that storage, that can cost you. But generally, Azure storage is very cheap. So if you are using that to store documents, connect to SharePoint from SharePoint. So storage is another way of you'll need an Azure Key Vault to store things like credentials, API keys. You'll also maybe need managed identities as well for that kind of secure exchange between moments that are in Azure with in platform. And then there's those tokens depending on the model that you pick, base model, depending on tokens you're using, so you're going to be, how many people are using your Copilots, how much data it's giving you back and forth. You can control that. And there's a link to that. That's for all of the models and all of the token rates. So there's sort of things to bear in mind. I found that over the last week or so of playing with my demo and trying different things, just working with that one document, my bill so far is about $2.79. A bit of context. So yeah, that's it really. Is there any questions?
Yeah. So with the indexing, can you control how it indexes? So one of sources created that index for you basically off the document. But let's say on the document you had both positive and negative. So meaning, yes, you can book travel under these conditions, but no, you cannot book travel, for example, under these conditions. Or for example, you can book travel to this country, but not that country. How do you make sure the information that's coming back is not the first positive? If that makes sense.
Yeah. So you can control all of that in your AI search itself. So where I was working from was just Azure AI Studio, which is like a smoke screen, I suppose, for what's going on underneath. If you want to get into it depends on your skill sets and the resources that you've got. But if you've got Azure AI search expert, that's exactly that, then that's where you'd go. You go into AI search and you'd configure the index and the ranking models and all of that kind of stuff as well in there.
I don't really understand is that like you know how like you've got to be setting up all these Azure resources and stuff like that. What is the huge advantage that it gives you that like you rather to set up all this stuff rather than like directly connecting? So OpenAI, for example, like provides like APIs for ChatGPT. You can programmatically directly like connect to ChatGPT and you can use it in your components. What is the benefit that it gives you that you use Azure AI Studio over, for example, directly connecting to those LLM?
So the biggest advantage is, well, one advantage is control, and also the main reason is security and governance. So government agency, for example, allow you to just connect to ChatGPT, allow you to just connect out to the public ChatGPT language model that you're using, especially to putting in any kind of personal data or corporate data or anything like that, because there's no control or boundaries as to where that data is going and what's happening with it. So that's the first thing. And so the security, like it's all anonymous. There's no corporate authentication, there's no control. So the first thing is that these Azure resources are created in your own Azure tenant. Protect that tenancy and that resources with firewalls and with your own level anyway of assurance. But some government organisations will add to that, and they'll want, it's like, for example, private endpoints could be to all of the connections that I did, so that they can only come from certain networks or certain IP. So there's a lot more control and levels you can go to make sure that your data is secure. It's only being used within the model in your environment, it's not going outside. And
I'll give you an example. So someone at DXC responding to an RFP, and then they put the response public ChatGPT to read it and then to get some feedback about it. Later on in the bid process, we lost. After our competition, it's the same response that we used. The competition went to ChatGPT and said, how do you answer that? And they got our response. For situations like that, it's a public ChatGPT. And in fact, what we're doing is training our own model to respond to the questions that are common without sharing the public answers. I need that privacy and governance. Yeah, makes sense.
Question, just in terms of security, would you be able to like compartmentalize? So for example, for the same model or the same question, it will have an answer to an anonymous portal user, for example, but it will have a different answer to a dedicated user, like it's on the role.
yes, I think that is like the prompt flow engineering. There's a whole other piece to this where you can have a flow, but similar, like behind the scenes, where you can direct stages of your Copilot. So if you the kind of the general, like, oh hi, how are you, book travel, and then get an answer back. But then if it's like, oh, who's the person that controls the travel arrangements and what are their phone details, then it might be you need some identity from you in that respect. So it's kind of like there might be some boundaries that the Copilot can work within with access or deeper signed in.
You can embed it into the message based on the identity like extra like information into things that you send through to get response back from the LLM?
Yes. If you deploy your model to, say, Teams, yes, identity from Teams, and it will use that. But if, like I've just done there, is I put a Copilot on a Power Pages portal, actually signed in, I was just anonymous, then block that. But I've opened up all of the security behind the scenes to allow that demo.
The questions that I always ask myself is about data. What can I do with it to infuse AI into the different use cases? That is there any guidance or samples or curves?
About how to manage your data.
What is the benefit of using AI with my data? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I've got some data, and everybody's talking about AI. Fuse AI into that, but I don't know.
Yes. So I suppose, and if you've heard of like the GPT, and that's recently, but that would be government, if you like, the government agencies have data, services. So isn't they're not necessarily easy to access. So, for example, the details about immigration or passports or the have to kind of, sometimes you have to dig around quite a bit to the agencies that hold that data. They can decide, we hold this data, we can put some of this data into a area where we can allow AI to, I suppose it really comes down to like the purpose, either demand from the public, or it might be and then it's okay, what data do we need to serve those? What kind of questions are we expecting? Interactions are we expecting? And it's relevant.
Yeah.
So that's where you'll have some data scientists required, someone who understands the data and you can maybe move the data because you don't, maybe the data's scattered. That's where you see the Fabric as well, linked with Copilot Studio, because that's a low code handling experience, if you like, to be able to gather all your data into one place and
So the last question, and this is probably more because I haven't done the research and I'm looking at a room full of experts, right? And some online as well. So how do I, if I have, for example, a website, right? So a public facing website, how do I protect my website to not be used similar in a way that you've done now, somebody else's chatbot? So you've now pointed, for example, to that US website to say, can I enter this information? But now your chatbot, for example, will respond with that as a reference site and everything else. But I want to protect that site not being able to be consumed by a chatbot. Would that be possible?
Yes. So just to give you an example, we did a demo for a Japanese company, and I used the Copilot Studio out-of-the-box capability where you can just point to a website and then get the information from there. It indexed it like that in a second. That's super fast. And when I did my research, I realized it doesn't actually crawl it. It just goes to the Bing indexing. Indexing is a like search engine optimization. So it does the normal crawling. And usually in your pages, you would have specific directive that would or stop crawler from getting into your website. You can put those. So when we did the demo, is the page it never got into. And it's like, but the answer is right there. I can see it's so simple. Couldn't get it. And then we realized that it has the keyword stopping search engine from popping. So you can put that directive in there and stop them.
Thanks.
Another way of doing that. I know that for websites, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a public website, you can put like what's kind of like the voice that comes through, or kind of like external parties they can access to your endpoints, right? Like, so
Yeah.
depending on where you hosted your public website, though.
Or you just put it behind like authentication and authorization. So
Yeah,
So
so
So that's me. Thank you for listening.